yesterday. Kentucky led the nation in attendance once again for yet another year. They've, I think, Drew, led something like 19 of the last 20 years. They had 1 year they lost to Syracuse.
Right. Syracuse
Am I right?
stole one.
There was 1 year because Syracuse actually could win every year because they have a bigger arena. They just don't fill theirs up. There was 1 year Syracuse stole, but 19 of 20 years.
For our top story at 7 today, we have a couple of special guests who are joining us here at WCIU. On my left is Mr. Ben Quinn, who is the CEO of American Engineers here in Glasgow. And on my right is Ms. LaDonna Rogers, the AVP of Human Resources at T.J. Sampson Community Hospital. We're not going to be talking today about anything that has to do with their line of work. We're going to talk about a special person today on our top story at 7. On Monday of this week, we woke up to some sad news that one of the favorite sons of our community, L. Rogers Wells Jr., had died overnight on Sunday. And everybody in the community was kind of stunned because everybody sort of knows Raj from the standpoint of how long he's been in the community and what he's done for the community. But the purpose of this interview is to tell you a whole lot more than you probably ever knew about L. Rogers Wells Jr. and the effect he had on people and on the community. And I'm going to start first of all with Ben Quinn, because Ben has been with Rogers Wells for a long time at American Engineers, and I've asked him to kind of talk about the importance that Rogers Wells has been to this community, that he never really kind of wanted people to dwell on at all. Ben?
Henry, you asked me, did Roger bring me to Glasgow? And no, that's not, he did not. The Parkway brought me to Glasgow. But when the Parkway was over, I wanted to stay in Glasgow. We were consciously moving back to Frankfort. And then I thought, no, I'm going to stay in Glasgow, try to make it work. And I came home trying to make rhyme or reason out of that. We had our own situations in the move. And someone told me to talk to Mr. Wells, talk to Roger Wells. So I talked to his dad first, because I thought that's who Mr. Wells was. He guided me to Raj, and with that, I told Raj what I wanted to do. I wanted to get involved in construction, the start of one or something. I needed some help in terms of money, if that was the case, or leadership, or become part of something that was already going on. And furthermore, I wanted to stay in Glasgow. And he said, well, I do want to get back into construction. He was out of it at that time. And so he told me, he said, I need to check a little bit about you. He said, let me do that and get back with you tonight. And I said, okay, but let me just tell you where I'm at. I've got a going away party tonight for going away to Frankfurt. And he said, well, what time can I call you? He said, 6 o'clock. 6 o'clock sharp, Raj called me. Didn't know him, remember this. He didn't know me. And with that phone call, he called me back and he said, I think we got something going. And he said, let's get together in the morning and firm things up, but I think we can make this work for both of us. So
it was that close.
It was that close. Just an instance with probably a 15-minute conversation. That night he called. He said, well, go ahead to your going away party. Don't tell anything about this. Don't tell anyone about our conversation. Meet at the Holiday Inn, which did become, I considered it our boardroom, because we met there early every day, 6 days a week, not 5. And we met, and we got together, we talked, and we kind of consummated stuff. And then that evening he had a cookout for me to meet his people that are already in place, and for them to meet me. And so I stayed with Raj, and that was in 1973. I left Raj. We separated our ways in 1987. He had to get out of engineering. He was going into Frankfurt, into the position we all know he holds. So that's my relationship with Raj. What did I get out of that? I got great mentoring. He taught me lots of things. He taught me the business side of being an engineer. I think he taught me a lot about being the people side of people, because we're all kind of, aggressive at a young age, and he taught me patience. And I remember a time that I came back from the coal mines, and I was aggravated, I was upset, and needless to say, he was too, I'm sure, over the instance. And he said, you got anything going this afternoon? And I said, no. He said, come out here and sit on these steps. And LaDonna, you know those steps on the front of where American Materials was and still is today, I guess. He went out on, we sat on that porch, and you know, he put his arm around me. He said, let me just tell you one thing. He says, you've got to have patience. I want you to learn patience. He said, I'm as upset over this as you are. And he said, just leave it alone. He said, let it calm down. Patience will come around.
Some pretty wise words right there. LaDonna, your history with Rogers Wells comes a little bit later as a young professional in Frankfort, Kentucky. Talk about how the fact that you came to actually work for Rogers in state government.
Okay, I can pick up exactly where Ben left off. In 1987, I was working at the Lexington Chamber of Commerce, had just graduated from college, and moved to Lexington at the unwise words of my father, who said, it's the craziest thing you've ever done. It's the most expensive city in Kentucky. Why are you going there? I went. So I'm working at the Chamber of Commerce one day, and I look up, and there's this man coming in the door that I recognize as L. Rogers Wells Jr. And I thought to myself, what on earth is he doing here? So he walks up to the desk, and he says, are you LaDonna? I said, I am. He said, can I talk to you? Sure. Is there somewhere we can talk quietly? Can't you hear him saying that, Ben?
Absolutely.
And so we stepped off to a side room, and he said, I'm working in this governor's campaign in Frankfort, and I need somebody. I need somebody that's my person. I need somebody that's loyal to me, because Rogers was a businessman. He wasn't a politician. And he recognized very quickly in politics that you had to have loyalty, because it was a very stressful situation. You didn't know who you could trust. So from that point, Henry, I learned in my life that if you have no other quality, loyalty takes you a long ways.
So here Raj is teaching you things there too.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah.
Let's go back a minute, Ben, for the fact that as you watched L. Rogers Wells Jr. in this community, working with him at American Engineers, you also saw the side of him that gave back to the place he calls home.
Absolutely. I think therein lies, if there's an injustice going on with Roger Wells in this community, there's so many people that did not know him and don't know him to this day.
That's why I thought we ought to sit down and tell some people a little bit of this.
Just go back to some small things. I mean, Raj was always a person that was looking out for either something that was beyond him, something that had to help people, the community. For instance, they built the swimming pool, the first swimming pool, the one we're talking about today. And once it was built, Raj and I had gone out for lunch, and he said, I want to go over to Captain, we went to Captain D's, I remember the day. And he said, let's go to Captain D's, and after lunch I want to show you something and get your idea on it. And I said, okay. So we went to Captain D's, which is on Happy Valley Road. We had our lunch, and we drove by the pool, and we pulled up in the grass over there in front of what then was Gray's building. And he said, we got out of the car, and he said, now just watch the cars, just a minute. Just watch the cars go by. And I said, okay. And I did. He said, what do you see? I see a whole lot of people looking at the swimming pool. And he said, that's my concern. And I said, so what's your concern? Move the pool or what? He says, no. What do you think about getting a guardrail put up? A guardrail was put in front of that pool probably within 2 weeks. And that was all about the protection of the young people using that pool. It had nothing to do with Roger Wells. It had nothing to do with anything. He just saw that. I'd see him stop in the middle of the road to pick up a brick. He would pull off the side, he'd pick up a brick and move it. That was Roger Wells.
Just wasn't going to want to have anybody say thank you for doing that.
No, he was a big part of, and you were on the hospital board. Hey, both of you are on the work at the hospital or on the board of the hospital. The children's wing of that hospital was a Roger Wells led event, monetarily, and I think part of the conception of that children's wing.
Right. Yes, and you know, that's one of those things that, one of the many things that we have to remember him by, the gift that he gave it, and didn't really want any recognition for being the giver.
He never wanted recognition. No. He never, he was the most unassuming, quiet, humble man I have ever known. And there are people that would probably say, Rogers Wells humble, quiet? He wasn't any of that stuff. He wanted, there was always something in it for him. according to many people. But in reality, if you truly knew him, he was all about this community. When we were in Frankfort, I had direction that if someone from Glasgow called or someone from Glasgow came, you rolled out the red carpet. Because those people were, as he would say, from down home.
From down home.
And when you're from down home, you get status with him. And he did a lot of things here during that time that I remember. You know, he was all about the infrastructure. He was about putting the pieces in place for everything that comes thereafter. And I think Ben can tell this more than I can. His work on road projects and drainage projects. I'll never forget the Happy Valley Road project where it flooded every time it rained a teaspoon. And he was very responsible for all of that, four-laning the bypass. I remember toward the end of the administration, you'll remember this, Ben, they were having a thank you party at Barren River State Park for Rogers. And again, humble, didn't want it. I had all these people in Glasgow calling me, what can we do for Rogers? What can we do? What do you do for a man who can do anything for himself? I don't know. So we chose something that we thought would be appropriate, and the governor came down for that party. And Rogers didn't want him to come. And he said, I'll never forget it. He said, we were going through town and he went, Rog, there's been more earth moved in Barren County in 4 years than there's been in all of Kentucky. What have you been doing down here? And he's like, I kind of liked it that way. I wanted you to stay away.
That's right.
And we put up highway markers.
That's right.
L. Rogers Wells Boulevard. And I will never forget when we did that, he looked at me and he said, you didn't put the junior on it. Maybe they'll all think it was my dad.
I remember that too, because I got the call on that signage.
Yeah.
Junior or no junior.
Both of you all are here today because of the fact that you knew Rogers Wells very well, and I want to ask each one of you to tell our audience in a couple of sentences, we've lost L. Rogers Wells Jr. What have we lost?
I think we lost, there's few people that I know, and I'm not a resident of, I'm not a born resident of Barren County. I wasn't birthed here. But during my tenure since '68, few people have touched this city or this county as much as Roger Wells has done, alongside of a few others. But we're talking about a handful of people like that. And that's sorely going to be missed. Absolutely, totally missed.
Yes, I think there's an element with that of knowledge. You know, he laid foundations and he laid groundwork for things to come in the future. But there's a knowledge base that he brought to the table that is forever gone.
Yeah.
And I know that I will personally miss him because he was a mentor to me as much as he was to you, Ben. And he taught me things that still today I still value and use every day in what I do. And, you know, I told my kids yesterday, they were all calling me, and I said, you know, if you could only be so lucky to have a Rogers Wells in your life.
Yeah.
Because he taught me loyalty and trust. And those were things that only someone who's very special to you in your work life can do that. And I said, you'll be really lucky if you have a Rogers Wells one day.
Those are wise words indeed. Funeral service for L. Rogers Wells Jr. will be tomorrow afternoon at the First Christian Church at 2 o'clock, and the visitation begins tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. I want to thank Ben Quinn and LaDonna Rogers for joining us today to share a little bit about the person that admittedly not a lot of people knew closely in this community, but will be able to feel and benefit from having known him for a number of years to come.